Welcome to episode 4 of the NonFunGerbils podcast. Today we're joined by John Watkinson of LarvaLabs. John is the co-creator of the Cryptopunks, which was the first NFT project on Ethereum and the inspiration for the ERC 721 standard. He also created Autoglyphs, which is the first fully on-chain generative art NFT project, as well as many other varied and creative non-blockchain applications. In our chat, we cover the fascinating story of the Cryptopunks, how the NFT space has taken off since then, the Autoglyphs projects, and we explore how NFTs solve key problems with ownership and art. At the end, we announce the winner and design of our HODL Gerbil NFTs, and give you the next non-fungerbil in desperate need of a backstory. So, on with the show, and we hope you enjoy it.
John, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It's a real pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're both big fans of your most famous production, which is Cryptopunks. I know you guys have been very busy producing lots of other things, but I thought to begin with, the best thing to do would just be to describe your background and how you got into the cryptocurrency space.
Yeah, so Matt Hall and I, who's my kind of collaborator on Cryptopunks, we've worked together, essentially for 20 years now, really. We met in college back in Toronto, where we went to school, and got started working on sort of, web projects. That was sort of the early days of server-side web and stuff, so we were doing a lot of that stuff. And then we both moved to New York around the same time and started working for different companies. Eventually, we were working for the same company, doing, once again, sort of Java server-side type stuff. But then we took an early interest in mobile, and that was before, smartphones and everything. So we were writing little games for the little Nokia 3310, those little tiny phones, and then that eventually turned into us being mobile developers once the smartphone market took off. And that's around when we formed our own company. So we've been sort of independent since around 2008, 9. It was sort of faded off our sort of dependence on sort of full-time work. So so we were doing mobile and server side, but we really were generalists. So we kind of became generalists in tech, and we're always sort of watching blockchain, with some interest. But it wasn't, we weren't really interested in just sort of the pure digital money thing. We weren't speculators. We weren't sort of in the financial side of tech. So we were sort of just watching it from afar. But then sort of when Ethereum came around, that was a little more interesting to us. The idea that you could write these more arbitrary contracts, and that it was, seemed more sort of kind of hacker friendly, or that sort of creative ideas could happen there. And so that's what eventually led to us making the Cryptopunks, which was our first Ethereum project.
Amazing. Could you go into a little bit of detail about how the images were produced? What was the kind of the design element behind it, but also the generation of them?
Yeah. So what it began is some of the games we had written for mobile involved sort of pixel art, and I've always enjoyed doing pixel art, and so really the Cryptopunks were something that I was working on anyway, like just as a fun pixel art project. So, and it was, I always say it was basically kind of like a Mr. Potato Head type thing, if you remember that toy, where you sort of take one of the faces and then randomly add a beard or hair and sunglasses and that kind of stuff. So quite a simple sort of combination of just layers of these that build up the character. And then I built sort of a random generator of those things, and there was a few details, like certain things don't go well together, so you want to prevent that. And there were certain types, of course. There was the more rare types. We can get into that a little more, the rare types of punks. So basically, I was just sort of iterating on this generator, and we were sort of interested in collectibles and thinking about that. And it was Matt who sort of had the connection of like, wait, this could be the thing. And like I said, we were sort of poking around Ethereum, thinking like, what could we do? What would be a fun project just to experiment and get a sense of what it's really like to work on this blockchain stuff. So it was Matt who said, "Oh, this could be the thing that we make them. Like, it might be possible to make them collectible on Ethereum." We didn't know, but we decided to take a look. And at that time, the only precedent for that was the rare Pepe stuff on Bitcoin, and that was like the colored coin stuff where they would make like a rare Pepe card and have like 100 of them or 1,000 or even just one coin. So sort of these, and so it was like, yeah. And I'm not exactly sure. We looked into that colored coin stuff. That was, because that was sort of the precedent. We looked into the color coin stuff, but we found it quite sort of obtuse, and you needed to have multiple currencies and everything. And then when we started poking around with Ethereum, we looked at the standard ERC20 contract, which is kind of almost, that's basically all anyone was doing at that time. Other than ENS, ERC20, and token sale contracts, maybe a few little gambling contracts I found here and there. I couldn't even find. I was amazed at how little there was really at that time. That was, early 2017. How few different kinds of contracts there were. But when we poked around ERC20, we thought, yeah, I think there is a way to sort of warp this into something that will make a single unique item for each token, and to have the tokens be not divisible and all that. So Matt and I sort of started in on that, and it was harder than we thought. We at first we thought, oh, this will be a fun, we can get this done in a week, and it'll be a fun blog post, and that's that. But then by the time we had it working, we put a couple months in on it, and a lot of that was, of course, just learning the ropes of Ethereum and Solidity development.
Sort of right at the beginning, did you envisage putting these like on chain, the actual images themselves?
Yeah.
I imagine, of course, that would have been quite expensive.
Yeah, that was our plan originally, and we sort of thought that would be necessary. That it's like the image has to be right there on chain, and that's partly why they were so small. And we had got them down to, I was doing like color reduction on them to minimize the amount of different colors, and experimenting with ping encoding, GIF encoding. Eventually, I had GIF encoding that was pretty small, maybe 250, 300 bytes, something like that. And even that was just still too onerous, and we know now that wasn't necessary, and that's not really the purpose, like you don't need to store the actual data, you store a hash to the data, like that's
sure.
Everyone does that now, but at the time we said, well, we just can't do it. Even at these tiny sizes, it would be really expensive. It'd be onerous. Like maybe we could have done it if we put in sort of more work and we're willing to spend more money on. The whole time we were doing this, by the way, ETH was just like, I think it was like $7 or something like that when we started working on it. We didn't buy any. We were just like, oh, when we need to, we'll get some Ethereum. And then meanwhile, it's $50, now it's $100. It's like, how expensive is this going to be to deploy this contract? And especially because at that time we were thinking of of putting them all on there. So that was part of it too. I mean, there was no, because this was like a brand new thing, and we literally were doing it just to experiment. We said, well, we're not going to spend a couple $1,000 putting all these things on chain. No, is anyone even going to care anyway? And so we said, well, let's just put if we just put the image, I think we just put it in GitHub. Eventually, it made it to IPFS, but we put it on GitHub, and then just put a hash in the contract. But that was one of the things we said, well, is that going to kind of kill it? Are people going to say, like, this isn't a strong enough sense of ownership when it's just a hash like that? We didn't know.
Well, clearly, yeah, as you say, people don't require that. Just to know that they have, they can provably show that they have, ownership, is enough.
Yep.
Luckily, because there's not a whole lot that we could put it on chain even now. I mean, there's potential in the future for that.
Yeah, and we can talk a bit later about our second project, Autoglyphs, which was that approach. But I guess to continue the narrative of how this all sort of played out, so we finally had it all working. Well, we thought it was working, and then and we deployed it in early June 2017, and and we just sort of put it out and put a link to it on like the Ethereum subreddit or something, and maybe I think we posted it to Hacker News as well, and essentially no interest. I mean, just one or two people came and claimed a few. Oh yeah, I should explain the structure. We didn't know what was going to happen, and we said, well, we got to give them away for free. It's got to start totally free, other than a transaction fee, of course. And because we don't want to put a price on these things. We just want it to be a fun thing. Like, you can have one of these. I don't know why, but you can, and then you can buy and sell them afterwards. And so, but we kept 1,000 for ourselves, because we said, well, if by some small chance it blows up, then we'll have a stake in it. But otherwise, we didn't sort of sell anything outright. We didn't charge any money directly. So kept 1,000. So there were 9,000 available to be claimed. And yeah, maybe 10, 12 of those were claimed after the first day. And then the next day, nothing happened. But then the following day, there was a Mashable article. And, it was one of those things where, we were like, oh, an experiment. This is what we posted, to Reddit, an experiment in owning, unique tokens, or, some sort of slightly nerdy explanation of what this is. And then the Mashable title was something like, this Ethereum project could redefine digital art, or something, something really like, could completely revolutionize digital art or something like that. And it was just a much more sensational title. And that was it. Like, by the time we knew that article had dropped, the punks were being claimed at a ferocious rate, and hours later they were all gone. And then the sales started immediately. Even before they were all gone, people were already starting to buy and sell. And I think I sold the first one, because I was just like, let's try it out, So I sold one for $1, roughly $1 equivalent at the time in ETH, and then I bought one for a little bit, and just to sort of, I was just trying to be like a market maker in the first few hours there, and so that was a pretty exciting day. And then I remember overnight, it had gotten crazy, and there was already someone had bought one of the rare alien punks for $3,000. Like, that was 10 ETH at the time. ETH was around $300. It was 10. So it was just like, wow. But then, and I don't know if how much you know the story of it. That's when we discovered we had a bug in the contract, which was just so deflating. And we were pretty novice developers at the time. And we thought we had tested it. We had our whole test scripts, and so I'll just explain, the bug. But basically, we had this silly bug where there was like a pointer reference problem, where if you bought a CryptoPunk, then you got the punk, but instead of the money going to the seller, the money went back to the buyer. And it wasn't something you noticed right away, because the money was held by the contract and you had to withdraw it. So people hadn't really tried it. Like, by the time I sort of went to bed that night when everything blew up, I hadn't bothered to try to withdraw. No one else had either. And so kind of no one knew about it yet. But in the morning, everybody was like, something's wrong. And we were just so deflated. We're like, oh, this thing was like taking off and people were really loving it. And now it's just like, that's it. It's wrecked, Like, it wasn't even that easy to find the bug. Like, it was sort of a failure in our understanding of how pointers work in Solidity and like pointers to data structures and everything. So we finally figured out what was wrong. And then we looked at our testing. We were like, we wrote what we thought was pretty exhaustive testing. And insanely, there was like a matching bug in the testing. Like, we were accidentally checking to see if the buyer was credited instead of the seller. It's just insane. Like, if the contract had worked, we would have found it. We would have realized our testing had a bug, and if the testing had worked, we would have found out the contract had a bug. But they both had the same bug. It was just insane. So then we were completely, deflated and demoralized. But we were like, well, we have to just deploy a new contract and just try to migrate everybody over, And like, obviously, these aren't upgradable contracts. We didn't do any of that crazy ownable stuff and everything. And I still don't believe in any of that stuff. I hate that stuff. So we like, all right, let's just do it, And we sort of explained to the people who were using it, this is the situation. And the good thing is, because we still had a record of everything that had happened, we could sort of unroll all the sales and go back to what everybody had claimed. And then people were, of course, very understanding. It was a really keen community, just happy to see like a fun new project on Ethereum. So people were even saying like, I'm going to honor all my sales that I did before. We can like replay them and stuff. So anyway, we wrote the new contract, and I will say one thing that we benefited from was our original contract. We just had the ability to offer for sale and then purchase. But with the new one, we added the ability to bid, so you could bid on a CryptoPunk, and then you would put the ether in the contract with your bid, and then they could come and claim it. And so in a way, having that do-over because of the bug really enabled more of a market to, instead of just sort of a one-sided market, now it had the two-sided market, which I think was really important. So in a way, it worked out in the end, and the community was very good at accepting. We were worried, like, are people going to be talking about like CryptoPunks Classic? Like like are we going to have a fork? Like just like Ethereum had a fork shortly before that. So anyway, yeah. So, but no, it was fine. It was early enough, and we got the solution in there quickly enough. Migrated everyone over to the new contract. We tested the new contract in such a paranoid fashion, which is now what we've done ever since. Like I feel like everybody needs to go through that feeling. I mean, Ethereum development is unlike anything else, or blockchain development in general. You can't have bugs, and I mean that's just insane. That there's no recourse to bugs, so you have to. And obviously, part of what that means is you have to slowly build trust in a contract rather than like a shotgun going off. But that's you don't often get that luxury in blockchain. So anyway, got everyone migrate over to the new contract. Yeah, tons of those sales were replayed, including the 10 ETH purchase of the alien that replayed, and I replayed all my sales, even like when I was I sold a zombie for like 0.1 ETH or something, and I'm like, here you go, here's your zombie.
Did you have to actually get people to recreate all of the transactions that they'd done originally then?
Well, we didn't do that. That was just the community kind of pledging to do that, and not everything was replayed, but a lot of stuff was. So it really very quickly. It wasn't the. We thought it would just kill the momentum. That there was all this excitement around it. It was fun, and there was like a market forming, and people were getting excited about this kind of that. And we thought, like, all right, in the week and a half it took us to get everything squared away, they're just going to move on and not care about this anymore. But no, everyone kind of came back, and it just sort of took off from there, and just kind of kept growing really. So that was good. I think part of it was that because we were the first NFT. There wasn't any others yet. It was still a lot of excitement around it, even despite the mistakes we had made. So, and the good thing is the contracts had no problem since. There actually is a little bug in it too, but just in its event reporting, which is still insane because we tested it. It just shows how hard it is to thoroughly, fully test something. Although I feel like we're a lot better at that now. Like Autoglyphs didn't have any bugs, but we have a lot better infrastructure now for testing. But anyway, the contract's solid now, and it's done, I don't know how many tens of thousands of transactions without any issues. There's always people complaining about it. That's the other thing too. Like after we launched it, and then someone's like, "It's not working for me. My money's gone," or something. We're like, your heart stops when you hear that. You're like, oh no, there's another bug. And then it always turned out to be some user error thing where they didn't quite realize how to interact with the contract. And now, of course, we're like very confident. Someone's like, "It's not working," and we're like, "Yes, it is. Yes, it's working."
It's definitely working.
Yeah, it's like, we'll help you, but we know it's your problem. So that's how these things go. You slowly build confidence in the contract.
Just a question about the migration. Would there have been an option to regenerate all of the tokens and then send them out, take a snapshot and send them out to everyone who was holding them at the time?
That's what we did. Yeah. So
okay.
So we replayed. We sort of snapshotted all the data of who claimed what, all the claiming. So we knew every address, what CryptoPunks they owned. And then we deployed the new contract, and then we had to run transactions. We basically had a temporary admin function in there that with a one-way latch where we could just assign CryptoPunks to people, and then once we said we're done, then that ability shuts down and can't be used anymore. But of course, right when that was happening was when the BAT, the Basic Attention Token crowd sale was happening. And so the network was, and if you recall, that's probably the most saturated the Ethereum network's ever been, because they had this sort of, they sort of turned it into this, like, everybody try to do a transaction at the same time. Like, it was just insane. Like, so we actually had everything ready to go and ready to launch the new version of the contract, and we just had to wait a couple of days, because otherwise it would have cost us something like 10 grand to run all these transactions through or something, possibly more. I don't even know if it would have been possible. I mean, there was there was huge gas transactions that were still taking like 24 hours to get through, and we had to run all these, transactions. We had them batched, so I think we had to run something like 200 very large transactions that almost filled an entire block, and it still cost us something like $1,000 to get them all through. But at that point, we knew it was worth it, so we just did it. But it took us. That was really a painful process to put all these transactions through at a time when the network was completely saturated, and that was when the crowd sale stuff was really starting to go nuts. And it was the whole incident. I still have nightmares.
But it's quite funny how at the time, you say your heart stopped, but actually building up a story behind these collectibles actually creates so much value further down the line, because people are buying into a narrative which they feel some affinity with, and it's possible that these things could never have been. They might have existed for that week, and then suddenly you guys were like, psh, right, pull the plug, let's start again.
Yeah, and you can go look at the old contract. Yeah, the old busted contract is still sitting there. Yeah, so it makes for that origin story, right? And the earliest things are always sort of the messiest, because even when we launched it, we literally thought like, well, worst case scenario, this will be an interesting like blog post on our website, like, oh, we did this experiment, and if no one ever cared, it would still be, it's like, all right, well, at least we experimented with Ethereum, learned how to do things there. So because that was sort of really our expectation, was some people might think it's kind of cool, and it'll be an interesting little tech blog post. So then you're not really planning for success fully, and then when it does kind of get a lot of interest, then you're not ready. You're on your back feet. So, but that's how a lot of things start in the early days. It's like you're not ready for it basically, and this was definitely and then of course that makes for sort of this like colorful origin story of how it all came together.
So where did it go from there? What was the next step? So obviously it blew up into this huge thing.
Yeah, so we just sort of kept iterating on the website. Originally, what's crazy is, to show how keen the community was, we didn't even have a Web3 interface when we launched it. You had to just hit your wallet locally and just start punching in commands. They just had to. So it was pretty crazy. We would just sort of we had the website that showed the punks and everything in, and then we would just sort of like run this command to buy this Cryptopunk. It was just very. And so we very quickly put together the Web3 interface, and then just sort of kept iterating on it, and providing a lot of the features the community wanted, and so just a lot of ways of breaking down, searching by different attributes, and looking at owners and how active they've been recently, are they around and everything, and then notifications for when you can sign up with our website and get notifications when there's bids or when transactions happen involving your CryptoPunks or any other ones you want to follow. So just a whole bunch of work was done during that time, and there was some pretty wild sales going on. Like there was this one guy. We ended up we also started up a Discord chat for everybody to talk about CryptoPunks, and then eventually we had a bot. If you go in there now, there's like a bot in there where you can just pull up CryptoPunks and look at them and do things. So that's kind of where everyone can talk about them. And so in that chat, we started to get to know some of the owners, and there was this one guy who was from San Francisco, I think, but he was on vacation in Sri Lanka or something like that. And he was just one of the guys who got in really early and sort of got the project and liked it, understood it. And so he claimed that, I don't know if we talked much about the rarity. People might know about it, but there's, most of the CryptoPunks are just like regular humans, but then there's roughly 90 or so zombies. Green-skinned CryptoPunks, and then there's about 20 something. I don't remember the exact numbers now, but there's about roughly 25 apes, and then there's only I think like 11 aliens. I should know these numbers. Nine aliens, but anyway, very small number of aliens, and so they're like the rarest, hardest thing. But he had claimed, I think, 7 of the 9 of them or something like that he had, and he had a bunch of the apes and stuff, and he had a whole bunch of really, what had now become valuable CryptoPunks. Anyway, and he kept selling them slowly, like he was sort of really holding out. but he kept selling them. And then when we were chatting with him, he just said, "I just keep extending my vacation," and he like I think he ended up clearing something like $100,000 on these things once it was all over, like because he just kept he had a whole bunch of them, and he just kept slowly selling them. And some of the ones he sold, of course, eventually got sold for higher values, but he still did pretty well. And so yeah, he was going hiking. Like he said, he was hiking in the mountains there or something like that. So he said every day he would go hiking, and then he would come home, sell a CryptoPunk, move his flight a couple days later, and then go hiking again, come back. Yeah,
that's so cool.
Living the life.
Yeah,
living the life.
Yeah, so the vacationing CryptoPunk owner. Yeah.
So you've managed to produce something that's kept someone on holiday for a while. How about yourselves? Because clearly you still have some, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
But how do you view your collection?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we started with 1,000, and we have roughly the same amount now. We probably have a little more than what we started with, but not much. And that's because we're just sort of we just try to be market. I mean, the great thing about it, and this is I feel like so many people forget this stuff, and with CryptoKitties and others that came later were much more complicated and have a much more the company is selling these things vibe. So Matt and I are now CryptoPunks users. We always remind people of that because people will say in the chat, "Hey, admins, you should do this, you should do that." It's like there's no admins. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we administer the website, but anyone can make that website. You know what I mean? Like there's no special data in that website. There's we have a certain authority talking about it because we created it, but beyond that, we have no special privileges. So we always say, like, we're just owners now too. Like, we're just participators, and we can't change the contract. Certainly now, in the early days, we had to redeploy it because it had a bug. But if we redeployed it now with upgraded features, I don't think the community would accept it. They would reject it, and rightfully so. We wouldn't do it, and they shouldn't accept us doing it. It is what it is now, and that's what makes it this thing that can go on forever now, and never and there's no, oh, will there eventually be like 100,000 CryptoPunks or 1 million? It's like, no, that's not possible. If we make new ones, which we also don't want to do, but if we were to, they would always be second rate. They would never be the original ones. And
you're buying that piece of history, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. And it's just you can always just have some collectibles. You can go onto Fortnite or any of that, and there's collectibles. But it's like if you're really to make these real, to make them as tangible as a physical collectible or possibly more, they have to be this fully decentralized version. That's what we believe. And so anyway, to get back to the question, yeah, we buy and sell a little bit, but just the same way everyone else does. We see a CryptoPunk that we think is kind of undervalued or we really like it or whatever, we'll buy it. And then someone gives us a good price for one of ours, we'll sell it, although we don't sell much anymore. It's been a while since we sold a CryptoPunk. We also, though, have insanely, I mean, it was so crazy how what that Mashable article said about changing the digital art market, like that resonated in the art community too. And so we started to get invited to speak at some art conferences. We spoke at Christie's in London, which is, that wasn't something we expected to do in our careers. And but people it really resonated because what we found out is that this really did fill a gap. And I think this is something you've talked about on previous podcasts. But the idea that digital art is important and people like it. There's no one who argues that digital art is in some way inferior to physical art. Digital art is very beloved. It's in museums, it's a serious thing. However, the market for digital art has always had a huge problem in that how do you own it, right? I mean, it's just data. You can copy it and everything. And so successful digital artists, in terms of their art being considered important and enjoyed by many people, they've had to sort of still fall back and do physical works in order to make a living. And so there was a lot of interest from the art community at kind of wondering, will this solve that problem? Will this finally be the way for digital art to enter into the contemporary art market as a first-class citizen, instead of that second-class citizen that it's been up until now? And then that even led to us exhibiting CryptoPunks in galleries and shows, which was another astonishing thing that we never would have predicted. And what we did there, we tried to be we always said, let's try to be an ambassador from the traditional art world to the cryptographic digital art world. And so what we did for art shows is we did nice, fancy physical prints of the CryptoPunks that looked really good. But we paired that with an envelope sealed with wax, and we even have a custom like CryptoPunk wax seal we got made, which was kind of cool. And in there was the private key for that CryptoPunk. So it's sort of like, it's still a physical thing, still kind of giving people that understanding that, you know, and just that real world things. And so it's sort of 1 foot in each world. But then then we kept saying, like when they said, like we were often asked, all the time we were asked, well, is the print the artwork or the envelope? And we said the envelope. You know what I mean? Like the print is just a print. You can print another one. You can print as many as you want. You can go print any CryptoPunk you want. We just printed it. It's almost like, you know, that's just the sort of the cover of the album. You know, it's like the content is the envelope. So and that seemed to resonate, and you know, we sold out in the shows that we were in, and so there's been some interest, and we hope that we sort of forwarded the you know, advanced the cause of using this cryptographic NFT method to make digital art something that can be bought and sold. And we feel like if it's really taken up by the contemporary art world, they will end up loving it, you know, because right now transacting physical art is so expensive and old-fashioned. You know, like the auction house takes 50%. You have to get the art checked for provenance, and there's a huge expense there to have all that stuff, you know, all your ducks in a row on provenance, and then transporting the art, you know, maintaining it. Like, so people, you know, all these wealthy people participate in the contemporary art or art market in general, you know, and it's not very liquid because you're dropping at least 50% every time you do a transaction. So if they ever got fully on board to the NFT sort of digital art thing, and really the infrastructure was in place to really feel like you own it, to be able to display it well, like to have all the mechanisms that they need, then it would be so compelling, I think, that you could just sit there on your computer or on your phone or something and just transact these things. And no matter how much you spent, you know, however many millions were spent, the transaction fees would be like 50 cents or something. You know, that's just like unheard of.
Yeah, I think that paints a, you know, really good picture of why we're all so excited, and we're seeing it emerge. Your project was the first on Ethereum. How do you see the space having progressed since then? Are there things that excite you from that initial sort of genesis moment? Are we going in the right trajectory? What are your thoughts on the current state of play?
Yeah, it's sort of of two minds about it. I do like all the projects that have come since, and you know, whether they're high-minded art projects or sort of like trashier sort of pop, or even like game projects that are, you know, they're not trying to be like fine art. I think that's all necessary. It shouldn't just be, you know, it's not going to go straight line from like, oh, here's some new technology to like, it's massively valuable. You know, it has to have its period of experimentation and, you know, just have that sort of hacker feeling of just like people are just making stuff they want to make, and those who are interested in it are buying it, but there's not that pressure of like this has to be a huge market yet, you know, and so that's good to see. I think there is still a long ways to go, to sort of to go from, you know, there are the people who get it, love it, and you know, we're in that group. But it is very abstract, right? And it's like how do you really explain like why this is so different, you know, and have people truly understand that, and then how do you give that same feeling of ownership? I mean, it's just there's so many unsolved problems for this to become that truly mainstream thing, and so I think there's a long ways to go too, you know, and that it's not assured, you know, we're not on a path that this is definitely going to work out. I think there's work that has to happen, and there needs to be, you know, there's, I don't know the details of the story, but there was even the whole contemporary art market in general had its like moment in the late 60s where just some important gallerist in New York just said, that's it, I'm showing these contemporary artworks that are not like the old masters, which was the complete obsession in the art market at the time, and I'm going to make these things expensive, and this is it, we're doing it, you know. And then all of a sudden that kind of like turned the page, and and all, Warhol and all that stuff took off as like important art. But before that, it was always considered sort of lesser, sort of crappy pop art or whatever. And so I think that needs to happen here too. It needs to have that moment when someone in the art community or something really, really sort of goes all in on it. And but for that to happen, there needs to be they can't just decide. They have to believe it too, and that means there has to be lots of good, interesting projects. There has to be like an increasing amount of just great stuff and great examples of this stuff really working and being cool before it sort of has that watershed moment. And so yeah, I guess what I want to see more of, I guess, is just not just more like tokens. That's fine. Like, okay, there's the ERC 721. You can just make an NFT, and that's fine. But also just more experimentation in the space. Just more like, what can we do with this? How can we extend, expand, play around with it? I think we're still in that kind of hacker phase, so there should be more hacking going on. And that's a little bit like what we tried to do with Autoglyphs, was like, can we push this a little bit in a different direction, and sort of not just make it a standard NFT, but do something like different with it.
So with Autoglyphs, it's generative art which is actually stored on the Ethereum chain. So that's the first time that's been done, right?
And not just stored, but generated there. That's the key. So basically the idea is that, so the contract generates the art. And so there's nothing external. So, with CryptoPunks, we made the images and then we reference them in the contract. And that's basically everything else too, every other NFT. And so we say, like, we sort of took that thought experiment of like, could we have the art actually come from within the contract? So the entire artwork and everything about it is contained within that, and you don't need anything external. And so if Ethereum lasts for thousands and thousands of years, then you won't need anything else. You won't need any reference to any external thing. You'll be able to see everything, how it was made, everything will be right within that contract. So that was sort of that thought experiment of going for that purity of a pure blockchain artwork.
It's like a totally freestanding NFT.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the right way to put it. Yeah.
Actually immutable.
Yeah, that's the way to put it. And so obviously that was very limiting. Like, there's only so much you can do in a contract, so we had to do a very specific sort of style of thing. And so that's why Autoglyphs have that sort of minimalist look. And what it generally creates are these like ASCII art patterns, and that's what comes out of the contract. If you just say, like, give me this artwork, or if you when we made them available, I can tell you the mechanism that we did for that. But it was generating them and giving this ASCII artwork, and then we sort of have instructions in the contract, just in the comments, of like, if you want to render this ASCII art in like kind of like a standard way, here's how each character is rendered. And it's just similar to how the character looks. Like an X just becomes just kind of more pure forms of an X and that sort of stuff. So you can kind of generate plots of them. But fundamentally, even just looking at the ASCII art, they look like what they are. And there's a bunch of kind of weird modular sort of math in there to generate them, which I sort of worked on that algorithm. Just originally it was just way too big to fit, and I just kept finding ways to sort of shrink it down and simplify it and reuse variables and all this sort of stuff until it could run. I wanted it to not just run as a view function where you could just get the art, but to actually be able to, when you purchased an autoglyph, that it would actually put it right in the event log for the purchase. It would be like, here's the actual glyph, like here's the whole thing just sitting in the event log for the purchase. So yeah, that was it was quite a challenge, but it was fun to do it. And so then what we did for that was we made fewer of them because we knew it wasn't going to be like, it doesn't have the variety to support like 10,000 of these things, and it's just a little more niche, a little more esoteric, But so we made 512 total, and then because we sort of had because we were known a bit from CryptoPunks, we said, well, if we just make them free, it'll just be a wild free for all, and that'll be that. But we don't want to charge money for them up front either, because we still want to have that notion of the community kind of supporting it and getting it off its feet. And then we don't want to kind of put a price on it arbitrarily. It's like, what are these worth? I don't know, but I don't want to do that. And then also, yeah, we like the idea of like, let's just try to grow something rather than just make something and sell something. Like if it grows into something that's successful, then okay, we'll benefit. But otherwise, we don't want to sort of try to take profits up front or something like that. So what we put a price on it that was, I think it was just roughly around $30 of American dollars of ETH at the time, and then that was just donated to a charity, and the charity was like a climate change fighting charity. So that was successful. It raised about, I think it ended up being about $13,000 for that charity, and they sold out quite quickly. I guess we could have gone a little higher with the price but it's still a little bit, we wanted to make it a little bit fun where it's like, and we dropped the project very quietly, just sort of put it out there. We still want it to be that thing where it's like, yeah, it just emerged. It's not some big announcement, it's not some big thing. It's just like, we just put it out there as another experiment. That's how we like to sort of approach these things. So, and then of course those, even though they're this weird generative thing, they're still standard ERC 721 tokens. So they're now traded on OpenSea and other places like that.
It's so you guys basically created the first NFT, and then this next project was effectively the first artwork generated on chain. You've got some pretty big firsts under your belt here. What's next? Are there things that you'd like to bring to market in this space, or do you feel like you've done what you need to do in the blockchain space, and it's time to try something else?
We generally don't talk about. We like to kind of drop our projects sort of in secrecy, like we don't talk about them ahead of time or allude to what's coming. I would say there's still things we're working on.
That makes total sense.
Yeah. Still things we're interested in. So yeah, we have things in incubation. We don't rush these things, so we sort of wait till we really feel like, even Autoglyphs, that was over a year from starting the project, and then sort of off and on, just sort of like, is it good enough? Is it getting where we want it to be? Like we waited until we really had it where we wanted it before we launched it. So we have stuff like that in incubation now that we're just sort of feeling out and trying to get right. But yeah, no, we're I think there is still cool, interesting things that can be done in this space, and so yeah, we still have an interest in it. It'll be interesting to see, whether it turns that corner, and I'd be interested in what you guys think. Turns that corner into being. There's, I guess, the question that I still have is like, do people care? Like, do they know and care what it means for it to be on the blockchain versus just the original digital art thing that, if people did buy digital art before blockchain, the gallery would write them like a certificate, that says this is an original, this artist, and it's one of 20, even though you're just getting like a, I don't know, like a CD-ROM or something, they still sort of say this is original and everything. And so obviously that feels pretty thin, like that gallery could disappear, someone could forge that certificate. Like, there's any number of problems with that. So this arguably solves that. Now you can always verify that something's an original CryptoPunk. There's always a mathematical way to be completely sure, as long as Ethereum carries on and is robust. But yeah, it does that resonate still with the average person. It resonates with our community of NFT enthusiasts and crypto enthusiasts, but that's what I still wonder. So I still feel like the jury's out, and we obviously need to like keep pushing this and pushing the boundaries and making cool things and because for me it doesn't feel like that it's just inevitable yet. But I'd be interested in what you guys think about that.
Well, we're sort of running our own experiment because we're not technical. We've come at it from more of a community perspective, and we're trying to create a sort of interactive conversation between us and Twitter to generate these digital gerbils, pieces of art, and then distributing them via the podcast. So it's
really cool.
It's kind of interesting to see where it'll go and whether it'll work and whether people will want to interact with us to get free gerbil NFTs.
Yeah. Well, and it's cool, and and when I say too, like, that people need to like experiment, innovate, I don't just mean on the technical front. Obviously most artists aren't technical. Some are, not all. And it's not. There shouldn't be an expectation in this space that you are technical. So So that's, this is the kind of experimentation and, that I'm sort of advocating for. Just like, what are ways to generate these things? What are ways to build community around them? So it's the right approach.
Yeah, I mean, it felt right to use the technology as we're exploring it, because the purpose of the podcast is essentially to sort of go on this journey with the whole community to see where it all goes, and we wanted to generate these things as we go. And yes, what's been really strange so far in this little experiment that Luke and I are doing is just seeing how weird some of these responses, like the artwork, like the last piece of artwork we had to create was a gerbil dressed as Avril Lavigne on a skateboard pointing to a whiteboard showing an ICO that had blown up.
I saw it. And I liked it.
And well, there's no way to have made that up. Like it had to just like come organically from the albeit very small group of people that we have so far following us, but it'll grow no doubt as we do this. So yeah, it's kind of using the technology and seeing how people react to it. But I think you're totally right that the idea, effectively, it's about educating people on digital scarcity and what it means and why there's scarcity, and the system, the technological system that's built on that creates that scarcity. And I think, I don't know, maybe I've got hopium, but the amount of time that our generation, the generation beneath us is spending online, and the amount, I mean, I don't know if you saw, but there was this World Cup, was it Fortnite World Cup? And there was a stadium of people, more than you'd see in like the World Cup final. I mean, it was completely insane. There was tens of thousands of people. And I suspect that that's probably where the sort of gestation of digital scarcity will begin. It'll be in that realm, and it'll probably bleed over into the art world, perhaps. But I feel like we're going in the right direction. There's huge amounts of interest in this gaming space, and to some degree, perhaps it'll be in the hands of the big studios. But certainly, I want to be on this journey to see when that paradigm shift happens, because I think it's going to be pretty explosive if it does. You're right; it's not there yet, but
and I think you're right that seeing like obviously the hundreds of millions that are spent on Fortnite items and skins and all that sort of stuff, for example, and those are digital collectibles. But of course, they're controlled by a company. They're just sitting in a database somewhere, and that Fortnite game will eventually, fade, and then those things will be worthless. But for a while they're not, but those people will have that experience. They're very used to, the idea of owning something completely virtual now. It's like, oh, I had some cool armor or something, and but then they might say, but that's kind of gone now, and then maybe they'll learn that it's like, oh, there would have been a way to have that forever, and then perhaps, like you say, then there might be some generation of art collectors down the road who are very, very familiar and comfortable with virtual ownership, who then have the sophistication to say, okay, I'm ready to own art and other collectibles virtually.
I'm certainly ready to own a CryptoPunk. I have CryptoPunk FOMO in every possible sense of the word. So it's been fascinating listening to the story of it all. Luke, have we got further things you'd like to cover?
I was wondering if LarvaLabs also works on projects outside of blockchain. So.
Yeah, we still do a lot. I mean, that's where we make our living, and so and I kind of like that right now because this project was like I said, kind of a side project in order to dive into Ethereum and understand it, and then it turned into this sort of more arty thing, and that's kind of our continued interest. Like my interest in blockchain really is kind of specifically with what can you do artistically with it. And so we're sort of keeping it there. We've done a little bit of commercial work in the blockchain space, but for the most part, that we just sort of keep it on the side as sort of creative projects that we do.
Is it? I mean, is it possible? Is it quite difficult for you guys to make a living like just in the blockchain space? I mean, if you wanted to go that route, would it be quite feasible?
I don't think so. I think it is pretty difficult right now. I mean, obviously we could sell a bunch of CryptoPunks, but there's only so much we could do that, and then what would that mean? Like we don't want to do that anyway, but there's only the market's only so big right now. We're still really talking about a collection of enthusiasts, and it's growing, and there's more people who know about it. Like I said, there's some interest in the contemporary art community, but just to turn the corner and say this is what we do now would be very difficult, I think, at this time. And I think that's fair. It's early. It's not worthy of that yet overall. Just like it's just a fledgling movement. So I think it's. I wouldn't expect to be able to make a full living on it yet.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's tricky across the board, isn't it? There's a lot of people trying to find a way to monetize this thing and actually live from it.
Yeah, and I would say maybe probably OpenSea is getting there, right? Because they sort of cover the whole market and they take fees, and I feel like that company is starting to turn the corner where they're starting to bring in enough. I mean, they're I think a funded startup, but I feel like they're that like the market's growing to an extent where they're probably making pretty good money now. They're starting to really pay expenses out of revenue instead of just burning. So that there's a sign that it's starting. There's some full-time people working in this space now, and obviously a year or 2 years ago there were none. So it's starting, but yeah, it would definitely be a struggle to just go full-time on it, certainly.
Do you have a favorite project that's not your own?
Yeah, I really love Eve Sussman's project. I just have to remember the name of it because it's 23 seconds atomized. Is that right?
Oh yeah.
Let me just look it up to make sure I'm right about it. Here it is.
That was the film,
89 seconds atomized. I don't know why I said. Oh yeah. That's because I own Atom 23. That's what. So anyway, yeah. So that was a film that was quite successful, and it had a very it was an art piece that was created in the early 2000s, and it was very well received, and a true fine art piece of film, and it's owned. And this was one of these kind of digital art things where it's owned by a few community members in like the museum space. So there's I think the Whitney Museum has one, the Museum of Modern Art has one copy, and of course theoretically there could be more copies, but these are the official copies, and that's how that's done. And so anyway, she had her one last artist print, Eve Sussman, and she decided to sort of let it go free on the blockchain, and it was all broken up into these little atoms, which are just very small chunks of video, and 20 pixels square, and you could buy and sell them, just like a standard token. But what's interesting about it is now, in order to screen that, you would have to get the community to come together and sort of allow that to happen, and so it's very interesting. She's really given over the control of that. Her last artist copy of this, one of her, if not her most famous piece, and that's a thing that would otherwise be very hard to view. I mean, maybe the Whitney would organize a viewing of it once every few years or something like that. But now it's in the hands of this community. So I just thought that was very bold, sort of brave step she took, and an interesting use of it. It sort of involves now the governance of this thing, and a unique use of it, especially at the time. That was a new approach, and the Snark.art people did a good job on the sort of the tech and the handling of the sale and everything, and so that's a pretty cool one. I really like that because it was just like a real leap of faith into this tech from sort of the more traditional market, and it's kind of, I feel like more of those leaps will lead to a more widespread acceptance of this approach.
I think it's very interesting, the idea that you have to have a collective cooperative event to bring everyone together in order to actually appreciate what you've got, because on its own it's just a tiny few pixels.
Yeah, doesn't look like much on its own. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's something really cool about that.
It's a unique concept.
Yeah, and then there's weird, things you can do with it. If weird mashups, you get together with a few people who own these things and do some. So it sort of transforms the piece a little bit and everything. So I think that's really cool, and probably my favorite my favorite sort of project that I've seen out there. And but yeah, like there's lots of good stuff, and I just look forward to seeing more. And I love your gerbils. I want to.
Well,
I'm gonna try to score one.
We'll keep coming up with them. Luke, what's our next one?
Our next one is 100x leverage gerbil.
Okay.
I mean, there's so many different directions that we can go with because obviously we put out a name and then let people come up with the story.
Yeah.
But it's like there's so many directions we could go with the name. I mean, what if you could name a gerbil and then put it out for people to come up with the description? What kind of direction would you go with it?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. Yeah, and obviously so far it seems like it's kind of that self-referential like blockchain culture stuff, but it might be interesting.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, there'd be other approaches, like you could base it on sort of current events, or
we toyed with Brexit gerbil for
that's not bad. That's an interesting
Brexit
one. Yeah.
gerbil.
Yeah, and especially if you're doing a podcast a week, eventually add up to being this little history of what was going on at the time, and
that's super
immortalized. So that's an approach that could be cool.
Oh, the history of the world through the medium of gerbils.
Yeah,
that would be.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we might pinch that one. We'll see. It'll be weird and wonderful no matter what happens, because clearly so far we're being followed by some people with some pretty amazing imaginations. But it's been a lot of fun so far. John, thank you so much for your time and for your thoughts on this space. I'm going to go and put some mad bids on some punks.
Oh yeah.
Right now, Luke, I suspect you're probably going to do the same.
Yes.
I doubt I'll be able to get a zombie or an alien, but maybe a cool hairstyle or something.
I only had one zombie. I mean, we have our little collection, that kind of our untouchable collection, but in my own little personal things that I was just buying and selling in the early days, I had that one zombie and I sold it for whatever it was, like 0.1 ETH early on, and I've never been able to score another one. so I don't have a zombie. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll look into it. I'll see whether we can rub a shekel or two together, Luke, from the gerbil coffers. Maybe we can get a mascot CryptoPunk.
We're just going to make sure we're not bidding against each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Well. Okay. Well, that's certainly true. So yeah, John. Once again, thank you so much.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
And
thanks, guys.
We look forward to more stuff coming out of LarvaLabs.
Cool. All right. Cheers, guys.
Brilliant.
Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Cool. Thank you so much.
So, George, that was wonderful to have an old school CryptoPunk to come and chat with us.
What a total legend. I mean, he pretty much kicked off the whole NFT space. So much there in terms of innovation. Yeah, real privilege to have him on. Talking of innovation,
we've got HODL Gerbil.
Let's go ahead and talk about the gerbils that we've got for this month. Again, we've had some wonderful responses. Am I right in thinking this particular one's going to be fairly rare, Luke?
It's going to be the scarcest gerbil so far.
Hopefully they won't get scarcer.
Well, they can't get much scarcer.
Let's kick it off with @WhereKitty1. Thank you so much for this. Here we go. Late one night, when the moon was full, HODL Gerbil sat outside his house watching the sky. Suddenly he spotted something twinkling from a crow's nest high up in a tree, and he was breathtaken. From that day on, HODL Gerbil spent all of his time collecting crow's nest treasures, polishing every shiny thing he found, continuously waiting for the next full moon to show up on a cloudless night so his treasures could shine once again. The other gerbils felt a bit sorry for HODL Gerbil. They kept hunting for these shiny things instead of filling his lair with edible stuff, They wondered if he'd starve when the winter came. Some nights the HODL Gerbil wondered if the other gerbils were right, and he sat up all night shaking with fear. But then a tiny piece of moonlight broke through the thick clouds, and he got his faith back. For one day it would become a cloudless night with a moon, and HODL Gerbil's treasures would shine once again. Okay.
Oh, well, I don't know whether that's a warning not to spend all of your time and money on NFTs and forget to feed yourself.
There's a sort of, there's a veiled warning there, isn't there?
Or whether it's actually it's okay to do this, because when the moon shines, your shiny NFTs are all that matters.
I mean, you could read a lot into it, couldn't you? But thank you so much, We're Kitty.
Yes, that's fantastic.
Right. Next one, Luke. Have a crack at
Next one, onto. We've got Dap Wizard. HODL Gerbil looked long and hard at the market trends. All logic said to sell, but this gerbil had strong paws to hodl those heavy bags and weather the storm. So that they did. Their moon never came, but their paws remained strong. Well, HODL Gerbil is a inspiration to us all.
Certainly is.
We must remain strong and not keep selling our bags every time the market crashes.
That is what it is to hodl, is it not?
Well, yeah. Is hodling a virtue then? It's the virtue of strength of character.
I guess you can interpret it in a whole bunch of different ways.
Yes. Well, thank you, Dap Wizard.
Yep. On to our winner.
Our winner. That's Chris Nunes.
The Good Noons.
He did a great entry last time as well, actually. But this time you've won, so congratulations.
Shall I give it a read? Here we go. I will hug her and pet her and squeeze her and never let her go, even if she is naughty and bites me, or poops in my hand, or scratches my eyes out. She is mine, and I will hodl onto her for evermore until she grows. This is my HODL Gerbil, and her name is Lambo Moon. Wow.
It's from Of Mice and Men.
That's a good link.
That's bringing in some real classic literature.
I mean, these have all been very, literary, haven't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
and actually, this has been referenced in loads of stuff, because the Bugs Bunny and a load of the old Warner Brothers stuff, they used to reference this particular, not meme. This is like the old school version of a meme, a quote from a book that keeps coming around and gets reinterpreted.
Well, it's beautifully done, and it's going to produce a beautiful illustration. So congratulations, The Good Noons. You're going to produce yet another completely wacky, weird, and wonderful illustration of gerbils in all kinds of odd situations. So thank you very much for everyone that's entered this month's gerbil competition. So, Luke, give us a rundown of what the artwork's looking like for this one.
Well, we've got HODL Gerbil being hodled by George from Of Mice and Men. And he can't get away. He's worried he's going to die. And all he can think of is getting back to his Ledger Nano.
Right, which is in a safe?
Which is depicted by the safe here. It's his cold storage, his hardware wallet.
And the gerbil is such a hodler that it's basically living rough.
Living on a park bench. He's got a fire in a trash can, and he's chained his Ledger Nano safe to the park bench.
It's a true HODL Gerbil.
He's so hardcore that he won't spend his crypto on anything.
Wow. We are definitely going quite left field with what's coming out of our Twitter feed, but I guess this is good, right?
Well, I mean, there's a certain level of whispering that goes on here. When you relay a message. So we put out the name, it goes to Twitter, it gets adapted and comes back to us, and then we readapt it and then send it on to our artist, who then adapts it again, and then we have our final product.
So we literally have no idea what these are going to look like so we say HODL Gerbil, and we simply haven't got a clue how this is going to turn out. But they always seem to turn out pretty well, right? I like them. They're very collectible.
That's the great thing about having an amazing artist on board. So next month's Gerbil, we've already given it away on the show.
Yeah, we have 100x leverage Gerbil, which, if anyone's ever got involved in margin trading, will know that this is a very special kind of fear that only those who are truly playing with fire will understand. I've personally tried to keep myself about as far away as I possibly can from margin trading, but I feel like I understand people who or at least understand how it must feel to put a 100x leverage on something that's as impossible to call as Bitcoin.
Yes, it's a way for people to ruin their fortunes in split seconds.
In a split second. So what does a gerbil look like that potentially might have lost its life saving of seeds in one moment of total 100x madness on Seed Mex?
Seed Mex.
Well,
what does a gerbil have to go through to go all in 100x long Bitcoin?
And maybe the image is what it looks like to win. I mean, if the market goes in your direction, maybe you've got some pretty big piles of seeds there. Who knows? I don't know. My mind's already running away.
I feel like winning on 100x leverage would possibly be the worst thing, because you'd make a load of money and then you'd 100x leverage again.
You'd
lose even more money.
You'd be doing 1000x on 4x. You'd be margin junkie gerbil. Okay. Well, listen.
It's the crack of crypto, isn't it?
We'll leave it for our community to come up with how they imagine it to be. So that's it. Yep. 100x leverage gerbil is your gerbil for this month. Go ahead and send us your weird and wonderful tweets, and we'll read out the winner on the next show.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So remember to send that into #100x leverage gerbil.
It's a bit of a mouthful, that's one. But...
That is a mouthful. And also #NonFunGerbils. Catch us on our website, nonfungerbils.com. If you would like to help support the podcast, buy a t-shirt.
Indeed.
And then, or support us on Patreon when we get Patreon one day.
Yeah.
Or you could just randomly donate Ether to our Ether address, if you could work out what our Ether address is. There's a game.
That's very inviting, Luke. Yes, if you can go to the trouble of trying to work out what our Ethereum address is, we'd be very grateful. Yeah, brilliant. I think we need to work on our donation methods, I think.
And we need to work on our intros and outros, I think, as well.
Yeah, indeed. All right.
Yeah, great.
Nice one. Till next time.